Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another dispatch. I'm making sure that my audio is working. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's no fun. So I would like to continue the article on Jenny Saville that I started last week. It's really good. I'm not going to read all of it, but a big chunk of it. So bear with me. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring it, besides how good she is as a painter and talking about painting, is she's talking also about being a mother and parenting and the art world. It's sort of like it doesn't exist, parenting, and particularly if you're a mother and a painter, or an artist. And I just thought it was great what she had to say, and that it was in the New Yorker. And anyway, there you go. So without further ado, and yes, I am recording. Okay. In the late 2000s, Saville gained a knowledge of flesh unavailable to de Kooning, or to Rubens, or Velázquez, or Rembrandt, or Bacon, or Freud when she became pregnant. In 2007, she gave birth to a son, Arturo. The next year, her daughter Iris was born. Shortly before Iris's arrival, the director of the Oratorio di San Lorenzo, a Baroque chapel in Palermo's historic center, suggested that Saville make a work to fit inside an empty frame above the altar, previously the site of a Caravaggio painting of the Nativity that had been stolen in 1969 and never recovered. Saville had a friend photograph Iris's birth and used the images to guide her work. A preparatory sketch showed a bloodied infant in the moment immediately after delivery, being held aloft by a midwife, umbilical cord still attached. The image embodied the convulsive drama of childbirth that is occluded in a traditionally peaceable nativity scene. Giving birth is like being in a Francis Bacon painting, Saville once said. The infant's suspended posture hinted at the forthcoming violence of the crucifixion. The painting was never realized. A replica of the lost work was commissioned instead. By the time Arturo was a toddler and Iris an infant, the family had settled full-time in Oxford. After years of being consumed by her art, "My life is subservient to painting. I can't find a substitute for it in the world," she told The Guardian. Saville became absorbed in motherhood. "I remember going in the studio and having a few hours, and I almost couldn't do anything," she told me. "When your children feel pain, you feel pain. That shocked me. If they cried, you almost feel it inside. You actually are physically linked with them. It's incredibly animalistic." But she soon discovered that being a parent didn't diminish her creativity. Rather, it offered a tremendous stimulus. For an artist who had spent decades studying and painting the human body, the opportunity to observe the evolving bodies of her children was fascinating, all the more so because their flesh had been generated by her own. Just watching them grow was so exciting, watching them jump in the bath, or the way they moved around, or the way their bodies were constantly changing, she said. There were these human beings that were very mobile, running around, and that became very visually exciting. And the level of love was so beautiful. I felt all these things were circulating in me. Artists who are also mothers have sometimes found inspiration in their children. Bert Morisot, the Impressionist, had made tender paintings and drawings of her. I should change my. A little hard to see, a little hard to read. Easier. Okay. Bert Morisot, the Impressionist, made many tender paintings and drawings of her daughter Julie, reading or sewing or gazing out a window. Sally Mann took photographs of her children for a decade. But in the old master paintings in which Saville had steeped herself, representations of children, especially in religious imagery, often missed something essential about their nature and about the ways in which maternal care taxes even the most devoted. Raphael's Madonna del Prato, which hangs in Vienna's Kunsthistorische Museum, a short distance from the Albertina, shows a mother of Christ who is remarkably serene, given that she is in charge of two toddlers, one of whom is holding a skinny cross sharp enough to take someone's eye out. The only image Saville could think of that captured anything close to her experience of the unpredictable movement of childish bodies was a pen and ink drawing by Rembrandt, which shows a mother struggling to control the wailing toddler in her arms, his shift risen up and a kicked-off shoe flying through the air. Saville started drawing her son soon after he was born in an effort to portray what she called the unsentimental truth of early childhood. He was this whirlwind of limbs and slipping torso as I carried him, which was so exciting, she told Man in a 2018 interview. A drawing of a singular body just didn't seem enough to communicate this torrent of human movement. Saville made works that not only alluded to Renaissance paintings of the Madonna and Child, but also referenced imagery from drawings by Leonardo and Michelangelo. Saville, using photographs of herself holding her son, layered images onto one another to depict the ceaselessly evolving experience of mothering. Initially, Saville wasn't sure she wanted to exhibit these works, having put so much effort into being taken seriously as her male precursors. She was fearful of a perceived diminishment. I had other artists telling me, wow, if you show these, you are really saying mother, she said. I thought, if I don't do that, what does it say about the legitimacy of being female or being a mother? That's part of our whole human story. Or what does it mean about me if I resist it? Yes, I still take myself seriously as an artist, but I have had this whole other bit of life. Some critics were indeed harsh. The psychoanalytic art critic Donald Cuspit, reviewing one show of Saville's mother and child drawings and paintings in Art Forum, spent less time evaluating her brushstrokes than judging her maternal competence, writing of the depicted mother-child dyad that their bond is precarious and uncertain, and suggesting that the mothers in her paintings have profound ambivalence toward their children. Saville still bristles at the interpretation. If there's a crying child that had beauty too, in terms of acceptance of them in all their forms, she told me, I said to myself, I can't see that anywhere in art history, that acceptance of the way a child can be sleepy or crying. Why don't we see that? But I've seen that read as, I don't like my kids. Included in the Albertina show was a large-scale drawing of a mother and child rendered in charcoal on canvas. The composition was based on multiple images that Saville had made of herself and her son. As we looked at the drawing together, Saville explained, if I land the foot here, and then another foot there, and there's a hand here, all of a sudden it starts to create an anchored kind of balance. The work was titled Chapter for Linda Nochlin. Nochlin, who died in 2017, was a pioneering feminist art critic. In 1971, she wrote an article provocatively titled, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists? She argued that feminists, rather than fetishizing exceptions to the masculine dominance of art history, Artemisia Gentileschi, Angelica Kauffman, should acknowledge the deficit induced by historic exclusion of women from art academies and focus instead on bringing about structural change. What is important is that women face up to the reality of their history and their present situation without making excuses or puffing mediocrity, Nochlin wrote. Nochlin had been an early champion of Saville's work, writing in 2000 in Art in America of how brilliant and relentless embodiment of our worst anxieties about our own corporeality and gender, and arguing that no other artist in recent memory has combined empathy and distance with such visual and emotional impact. In subsequent years, Saville and Auckland became friends. She was a multifaceted character, Saville told me. She loved ballet, Manet, as well as feminism. In the charcoal drawing at the Albertina, the child was not a baby, but a boy of about 12, with heavy, dangling limbs and a drooping head. To my mind, the mind of a mother whose son, like Saville's, is now a young adult. The image offered a poignant evocation of parenting a boy through the transition from unself-conscious childhood to early adolescence. The body of a one-time babe in arms, now easily outspanning that of his mother. The drawing referred not just to imagery of the Madonna and her infant, but also to Michelangelo's Pieta, with its grown male body lying dead across his mother's lap. Saville's palimpsests of charcoal offered a concentrated representation of the maternal journey, with the rewards of nurture and the pain of sacrifice present in the same instant. I tried to combine love, tragedy, different emotions in the same picture, Saville said. That's when they become like human maps. Can you have multiple emotions in the same picture? When you look over here, you feel this. And when you look over here, you feel another way. And can you span that trajectory of life in the same image? She went on. There's a sense that the whole composition cannot exist in real life. But when you first look at it, is there a sort of believability, a suspended reality that is more real? Saville is close to her children, who are now in their mid to late teens, and she has continued to draw and paint them with their supportive assent. In 2021, she made a large painting of Iris's head, her full lips parted, and one side of her face bathed in a wash of prismatic color. When I have depicted them, I feel a level of beauty that I haven't experienced to the same depth with other picture making I did before I had them, Saville said. They gave me a lot of permission for beauty. If Saville's early work challenged the viewer to reconsider received ideas of what makes an attractive body, or even an acceptable one, and if her investigation into how flesh works led her to use medical textbooks and sometimes lurid images as the starting place for her pictures, her recent paintings of large heads ravish the onlooker. I have learned that when you work with very dramatic imagery and you're making a painting of that, the paint can't get beyond the image, she told me when I visited her studio. And so I have learned that working with a more simple portrait means the paint can be more visually exciting and can be a more joyful thing to do. All right, there's another section. It's worth it. It's good. In late May, a few weeks before the opening of the show at the National Portrait Gallery, I met Saville around the corner at the National Gallery to look at some of the work that had informed her artistic practice. We began with Leonardo, whose Burlington House cartoon, a charcoal on paper drawing of the Virgin and Child, along with St. Anne and the toddler John the Baptist, hangs in its own small room, dimly lit in order to ensure the work's preservation. When Saville was a child, her parents inherited a small reproduction of the image, and it had always fascinated her. I liked how you couldn't really tell whose leg belonged to whom and how it became a kind of collective image, she said. And as our eyes adjusted to the darkness, Saville's commentary illuminated the artist's technical accomplishment. The way Leonardo had made a knee appear to come forward from the flat surface of the paper. How the rhythms of certain gestures led the eye around the composition. how within a monochrome palette he had achieved emotional effects with differentiated tone. If you look up close, it's very warm on the eyelid because he uses the inner glow of the paper as the warmth of the eye. And then on the cheek, he uses this white, which gives the translucence of the flesh, Saville said, adding, "There's such an act of love in the making, too. It is so cared for in the bringing out of that form. The depiction of the knee, there has to be love embodied in the process of doing that." We moved on to a spacious gallery devoted to the work of Titian and stopped before three large canvases based on tales from Ovid's Metamorphoses. At the center was The Death of Actaeon, in which Actaeon, having disturbed the goddess Diana while she is bathing, is killed by his own hounds. Titian was in his 80s when he began the painting, and it remained unfinished at his death. Saville pointed to places where Titian was harnessing long-developed methods, the light falling on Diana's forearm, the negative space between the trees of the background. "Look at the way the dog is depicted," Saville said. "He delineates the underbelly with just one dark stroke. He's painted that cloth and carmine and that water and the transition of different aspects of fauna or flesh so much in his life that he's developed a kind of shorthand way of doing it. You take more liberties. It becomes more playful. You know what works and what doesn't." In a nearby gallery, Saville stopped before a portrait of Philip IV of Spain by Velázquez and remarked at the skill with which the artist had made a curl of light brown hair lift from the monarch's brow. "All his flesh is one," Saville observed. "When you are making a portrait, you have to make everything join together. Even though we've socially named these parts of the head separately, like eyebrows, for example," she said. "That's what makes Velázquez's painting so poignant, because he's able to bring that flesh together." We sat down on a bench before the Velázquez portraits. "There are rules when you make a picture if you want to have 3 dimensions," Saville said. "There's definitely a rational way of working if you want a chin to go out, for example, or you want a neck to sit behind a chin," she went on. "There's a level of rationalism required in order to do that, but you can also have a sort of suggestive, poetic nature within it." Around us, other museum goers paused before the paintings. Sometimes a visitor took a photograph of a canvas before moving on. Until recently, Saville was an avid user of an iPhone camera, documenting shapes or colors or shadows that she came across with a mind toward incorporating them into her work. The classical plinths on which the figures in her Fates paintings sat were derived from images of blocks that she had seen on a vacation to the Greek island of Delos. Lately, though, she has tried to keep her iPhone in her pocket. "Instead of taking a photo of something, I just stop and look," she told me at her studio. "Because we were on screens all the time, it's quite an enriching thing to do, to stop and hold that memory. It's almost like an experience is not complete now unless you take a photograph of it." And I told myself, maybe there's something missing in that. Saville explained that seeing the pink of a flower against the green of a leaf in her garden will sometimes inform which oils she mixes onto her glass palettes or which pastels she selects from her box. The way a lemon sits on a marble table with a shadow. Why is that so beautiful? As I have got older, the more beautiful things are what I have become attracted to, she said. If you'd asked me when I was 25, "Are you interested in flowers?" I would have laughed because it would seem such a cliche. But in fact, they are so powerfully beautiful. Saville doesn't rule out where these new interests might lead her. In Greece, she painted sunsets to study the transition of life to use for portraiture. She might yet try painting still lifes. Nevertheless, she always goes back to the birth of her own fascination with flesh. I'm very committed as a figurative painter that paints portraits and bodies, she said. That's a lot. Just that subject. That's a lifetime's work. All right, there you go. Great to read something like that in the New Yorker. I mean, for all of that, the painting, you know, what the inside of painting, and then being a mother, and that's right. So inspiring to her for her work. It was great. Okay, that's it. Keep making stuff. Hope you're all well. Keep painting. Keep. Okay. Bye bye.